Hi, I hope you've had time to read through the article that looks at the differences between an assurance review versus a public inquiry. If you have, then I have something further to add. After the election on the 16th of May, I emailed my fellow councillors, Councillor Stephen Bashforth and Councillor Marie Bashforth. I wanted to forge a working relationship so that the three of us left our politics at the door and worked collectively to give our residents here in Royton South the best. Within the body of that email, I also asked them a question. The question was simple. Would they vote for a public inquiry? On the 17th of May, Councillor Stephen Bashforth replied. He acknowledged my email and said he would get back to me. Councillor Marie Bashforth totally ignored my email. That was 4 weeks ago. So what I'd like to do now is publicly ask both Councillor Stephen Bashforth and Councillor Marie Bashforth, will you vote for a public inquiry? Will you put politics aside and vote for justice for our children? I look forward.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
A very, very good evening, Sunday the 25th of June 2023. This is episode 2. I don't know if episode is the right word, but the second of the series in the new series in the Recusant Nine transmissions behind a YouTube paywall. Thank you for those of you joining me last week. As you saw, I then edited the highlights and put them out on free to air so everyone else can view them. But this is the platform to view live. This is the platform through which you can engage and comment. And also this is the platform through which you support me, the 500 people who then viewed it. Well, let's just leave it at that. That was Maggie Hurley, the Royton Independent, the new Royton Independent councillor for Royton South, finished first, completely destroyed the two Bashforths and ousted the previous council leader Amanda Chadderton. Now, what you've got to understand is, separate to Maggie contacting both Steve and Marie Bashforth, and as you saw, Steve Bashforth said he would get back to her. Marie Bashforth did not give Maggie the courtesy of a reply, and it is not for me. Well, it is for me. We're all members of the public. Just because Marie Bashforth is the husband of Stephen Bashforth does not mean that he speaks on her behalf. She draws down her own allowance of £10,000 or so, plus whatever else between them they get on the various committees they sit on. So Marie Bashforth has to speak in her own right as a councillor. She did not, which I think just shows the contempt with which the Bashforths have treated Royton and the wider community of Oldham for decades now. Separate to Maggie Hurley writing to Steve Bashforth, my sources have confirmed to me that Bashforth is seeking advice from Jim McMahon as to what to do. Now, remember, Jim McMahon, the MP, is at the centre of this cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children. He is, it is him that they're protecting, isn't it? So Bashforth has gone back to his master. He's bypassed Darude Shah and has gone back to his master, Jim McMahon. My understanding is that there are other Labour Party councillors, in particular white Labour Party councillors, who've gone back to McMahon asking him what to do. Well, he's not going to support a public inquiry. And I'll go through this evening what they are going to try and do. So I'll do that. I'll go through that as we get through the evening. There's a lot to get through the evening. Thank you very, very much for those of you who have subscribed with the 99 pence. I think we're up to just over 90 of you so far. So my gratitude to you. So let's see where this journey takes us. Now, I want to start with, that's what I want to start with. So the Reuters Independent put this out, I think, on Wednesday or Thursday night. It's a document basically differentiating between a public inquiry and an assurance review. Now, I want to go through it systematically with you. You need to understand this is what Andy Burnham did on purpose. Whilst assurance reviews and public inquiries serve distinct purposes and have different scopes, there are certain weaknesses associated with assurance reviews when compared to public inquiries. And this is why we need a public inquiry, and I'm going to go into next the specifics of what the public inquiry should look at. First of all, the public and assurance review has limited investigative powers. It's what I've said to you all along. So significantly less investigative powers than public inquiries. Actually, an assurance review actually is an evaluation of existing controls, processes and procedures. It's not an investigation, it's an evaluation. And unlike public inquiries, they cannot force witnesses to testify, nor can they obtain evidence independently. They're reliant on the information they see, they're reliant on the organisation that they are evaluating, providing it. So Oldham Council provided Andy Burnham's team with the information that they wanted them to look at. That's how much of an evaluation this was. And the limitations restrict the review's ability to access important information or scrutinise the information it does receive with any level of depth. For the first weakness of an assurance review is that it's an evaluation and it has very, very limited investigative powers. The second issue it has is it's of a narrow focus. Assurance reviews are conducted within a specific context defined by the organisation requesting the review. So in Oldham, the council set the focus. It set the dates, the period from and to. It set what could be looked at. It set what couldn't be looked at. It defined everything in such a narrow way, it limited the ability of Andy Burnham's team. Now, of course, that was done with intention. So the narrow focus means they can hide. Then, of course, there's the lack of public transparency. Assurance reviews are typically conducted internally or by external auditors or consultants on behalf of the organisation. So you and I don't see what's gone on. The process and the findings are not in any way transparent to the public, leading to a reduced trust and public confidence. Public inquiries, you have things out in the open. Regular updates, details, none of that. Remember, there's no transparency whatsoever. Reliance on voluntary cooperation. If you read the small print, there are members of the council that did not give evidence when they should have. So our assurance reviews are dependent on the cooperation and availability of information from the organisation or individuals being reviewed. When key parties do not cooperate fully or withhold information, the effectiveness of the review is limited. Remember, Oldham Council did not provide, or if they did provide, the assurance review did not publish it. And of course, I'm referring to the number, just a simple number of how many children they identified in the narrow focus that they had who were groomed and gang raped. The Burnham's team would not even publish a number. There's the potential conflict of interest. Remember, this is Burnham's team. Burnham is a Greater Manchester Labour Party mayor. He hired, in the lead up to the review, he hired Sean Fielding, who was at the time the leader of the council. his girlfriend in Andy Burnham's team. So all of that went on, and raises a bias and impacting on the objectivity and the independence of the review. There was no independence in that review, and there are limited legal consequences. In fact, I'd go as far as to say there are no legal consequences. Assurance reviews can identify deficiencies or areas for improvement. What were the areas for improvement that the assurance review identified? None. Go and have a look at that assurance review. You'll see no areas of improvement identified, even though Oldham Council are quick to claim they are not the organisation they were then. So if they're not the organisation they were then, you would have on one column what they did then that fell short and what they now do that compensates for that. It's a simple chart, simple table. One column says this is what we used to do, this is now what we do. That doesn't exist. It's just gobbledygook nonsense, and the keenness to repeat there was no widespread cover-up, and the introduction of the word widespread means there was a cover-up, but it wasn't widespread, but we won't define what we think widespread is. There are no legal consequences, no prosecutions, no disciplinary actions. There weren't even any recommendations. Remember, this is the assurance review that took 2 years. 2 years. So, a public inquiry is an official investigation by the government to examine matters of public concern. It gathers information, establishes facts, and makes recommendations. It is led by an independent panel or commissioner with the power to compel witnesses, gather evidence, and hold hearings, usually in public. The findings can lead to legal action and changes in law and policies, promoting transparency and accountability. An assurance review, meanwhile, is an evaluation conducted by independent individuals or teams to assess an entity's compliance, effectiveness, and efficiency. It examines controls, processes, and standards, gathering evidence to provide an objective opinion. And I was being kind when I was trying to talk up what an assurance review was. The review results in a report with findings, conclusions, and recommendations for improvement. So let's have a look at what the two columns say. I'm hoping you can see this, and let's have a look at what the two columns have to say. So a public inquiry is an official investigation, whilst an assurance review is an evaluation or assessment. Public inquiries are established to investigate and gather information about a specific event or situation that has raised questions or controversies. An assurance review is intended to provide assurance that the reviewed entity is operating in accordance with established standards, policies, and procedures. Public inquiries are held in response to major incidents that have had an impact on society, such as disasters, public health crises, or allegations of misconduct or wrongdoing by public officials or institutions. An assurance review takes place when an organisation needs to assess itself, seek assurance and compliance, and improve processes. Managing risk is a key motivator of an assurance review. The aim of a public inquiry is to uncover the truth. The purpose of an assurance review is to validate whether the reviewing organisation is achieving its intended objectives. And during a public inquiry, an independent panel or commissioner is appointed, whilst assurance reviews are conducted by internal consultants or specialised review teams recruited by the organisation itself. A public inquiry will work with a panel of experts. Membership of a review team is predefined by the organisation being reviewed. And the public inquiry process aims to provide a transparent, independent, and comprehensive examination of matters of public concern. An assurance review, the aspiration is to evaluate the effectiveness, efficiency, and compliance of the organisation under review. The panel or commissioner then prepares a report summarising their findings in a public inquiry with conclusions and recommendations which is presented to the government. In an assurance review, a report is presented to the organisation. Failing after failing after failing, cover-up after cover-up of an assurance review. Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, knew full well what he was doing. The Greater Manchester Mayor knew full well what he was doing when he commissioned an assurance review. It was to manage the truth, it was to protect the Labour Party, and it was to try and hide the extent and depth of what went on. Because if he did not want to hide the extent and depth of what went on, he would have gone to the government in his capacity as Greater Manchester Mayor and Police and Crime Commissioner and said to the government, there is something very, very wrong in Manchester, there's something very, very wrong in Rochdale, and something even worse in Oldham. I clearly have a conflict of interest because it involves Labour Party politicians, and I'm a Labour Party politician, and I am asking for a public inquiry because the grooming gangs, the centre of the epidemic, what tipped it, what opened the floodgates was in Rochdale. It was Shabir Ahmed, and it's since been confirmed that Shabir Ahmed was a Labour Party member, was employed by Oldham Council, and the police hid his crimes. As well as the council, the police hid his crimes, and then at least one politician protected him and gave him a reference, whilst other politicians hid the nature of their relationship with Shabir Ahmed. So let's move on to what a public inquiry should actually do. So it's very easy saying public inquiry, public inquiry, public inquiry, but let me show you what I think a public inquiry should do. Because in Oldham, there's more that's gone on. So first of all, the public inquiry should look at the historical allegations of CSE. Not the cover-up, but how many of our children were raped? Okay, so that's the first thing. Next, it should look at the actual cover-up at the time. And this includes the infamous Jim McMahon email trail, and community relations. Next, it needs to look at, once exposed, how GMP and Oldham Council colluded to criminalise members of the public. And what I mean by that is, of course, Operation Hexagon and the repeated arrests of myself. And then the fourth thing it needs to look at, and this is a public inquiry it needs to look at, is Andy Burnham's assurance review, which was, in my opinion, an attempt to cover up a cover-up. Cover-up of the cover-up. So if you look at a public inquiry, what should happen is a public inquiry should, at the very minimum, look at these four areas. Remember, the assurance review, the last one, the assurance review. Gerard Jones. What was he? The Chief Executive of Children's Services or something? Managing Director? Prevented witnesses from giving their testimonies. Operation Hexagon. Greater Manchester Police working with Oldham Council to criminalise hundreds, if not thousands, of members of the public. So a public inquiry needs to look at these four aspects. How many of our children were raped and how they were failed? So all of that, for as far back as you want to go, that needs to happen without a shadow of a doubt. And the testimonies of those children, young adults now, needs to be heard. You heard the judge in Telford talk about the power of testimony and making sure that once part of justice is these stories are heard, what happened to these children, they have an opportunity to say what happened. So we need to know how many, and every detail. The assurance review, recall, used 10 case studies, but it hid all the information in the case studies. In fact, it didn't even tell the victims, the survivors, that they were being used as case studies until right at the end. So it needs to look at what happened, how many were failed, and it needs to look at the specific cover-up at the time involving James Ignatius or Rook McMahon. His press officer, remember the senior press officer, whose wife also worked at the Oldham Chronicle at the time? Recall how he celebrated helping kill a story of CSE in the news and said, double result, we've also won Northwest in Bloom. Remember how head teachers were meant to have been briefed at a head teachers meeting and that briefing never took place? Well, who hid that? Remember how James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon refused to provide evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee when he received a letter? There's a whole host of key events that need to be examined by a judge through a public inquiry. Not a Labour Party man appointed by Andy Burnham, another Labour Party man, to investigate a Labour Party man, Jim McMahon. From the minute I raised it, Greater Manchester Police have been trying to criminalise me. And not only trying to criminalise me, they are actively working with gangsters, the OBA cartel, some of the Pakistani mobsters, encouraging them. All of you here have had your social media accounts inspected. I suspect some of you have had your phones tapped. Why? Because you spoke out. That action is unlawful, Operation Hexagon. It's unlawful, and a public inquiry will confirm what took place and make sure it never happens again, and that the police officers who approved it are, well, I don't think they'll end up in prison, they never do, but they'll retire and run off with their pensions. And finally, this will be the killing of the King of the North, and of course when I say killing, I don't mean death, as in killing of his career. The end of the King of the North, Andy Burnham, because the assurance review itself needs to be investigated as part of the public inquiry. What it really sought to do, how it attempted to manage the truth, manipulate, mislead, deceive, and how once again the Labour Party is neck deep in it. And within all of this was the 4 attempts by opposition councillors to force the government coming in. So when you talk about a public inquiry, when we talk about a public inquiry, and I'm sorry if I'm dictating to you, but I need you to be very clear what we actually mean. There need to be at least these 4 strands to a public inquiry. I genuinely believe we passed the point of whether there will be a public inquiry. It's more a case of what the inquiry will look at, and those are the conversations I now want to have with people. The council will try and mess around. They'll try and say, oh no, it's not a public inquiry, maybe an independent inquiry, or write to the government in some vague way. They think it's a game. And worse than it's a game, they think we are stupid. But that is my position on a public inquiry. That those 4 themes need to be integrated into the fabric of what is put forward to the government. And once again, so I'm clear, because I offered to give testimony to Andy Burnham's assurance review, but only if it was in public. I am more than happy to present myself and put forward myself as an independent community member of any public inquiry that is instigated by the government. Unless there's someone better skilled than I am to do this. I'm clear. I put something out earlier. I think on Friday night I put a little document out on the newsletter. Burnham smoking McMahon's mirrors. McMahon's career is over. Burnham's career will end on this. A public inquiry will end Burnham. The former Prime Minister fell last week. He's now no longer an MP because people went after him with facts and figures and kept going, and the paper trail proved things beyond any doubt, regardless of whose side you're on. The Prime Minister, the man who was Prime Minister this time last year is now not even an MP. He's run. Burnham will likewise run, because I am 100% certain that a public inquiry will expose Andy Burnham's role in this assurance review, because it's his review. He sat in the council chamber when they presented it, and he looked all of you in the eye who was in that public gallery with me and claimed responsibility. He was the one responsible. Well, if he's responsible, let's see who is responsible now. These guys are finished. So well done to Maggie Hurley. Hopefully we can nudge it along with these so people now start to understand what we actually mean by a public inquiry, and also why a public inquiry. Why the assurance review wasn't good enough, because Arud Shah and her Labour Party stooges want to confuse you and say, oh, we've already had an investigation. An assurance review is not an investigation. It's an internal evaluation. A public inquiry is an investigation. Let me carry on with what I've got next I want to share with you. This is Charlotte Green, Charlotte Fringe, your local democracy reporter. Development partnership to bring millions of investment to Oldham. Long story short, this want to be big headline has not got the traction they wanted. And worse than not getting the traction they wanted, it's the response has been comical. The response has been comical. Let me find it. Just load it up for you. I'll go through the story, and I want to chuckle with you at some of the comments. So this is Charlotte Green, local democracy reporter. Development partnership for thousands of new homes to bring millions of investment to Oldham. Millions is in inverted commas because they can't quantify it, and it's an Arud Shah quote. So Arud Shah is talking about millions. A partnership with a private developer for thousands of new town centre homes will bring millions in investment to Oldham, leader says. So over the next 25 years, they've got a preferred bidder. They've reduced the shortlist to 2, and they want to build 2,000 new homes in the town centre. So that's the Queen Elizabeth Hall, the Old Court, the Civic Centre, round the back of Tommyfield Market and the Old Sports Centre. They want to build 2,000 homes. I'm delighted. Remember, these game changers, one after another, not a single one has ever been delivered. Well, this millions and 2,000 homes, Arud Shah is delighted to be able to report to the Cabinet that this process is almost complete. If it's almost complete, why are they reporting it? Because they want to divert the news. The council has gone through a really vigorous process of due diligence and has narrowed this down from 5 bidders to 2 final bidders. We're not yet in a position to name the preferred bidder, but what I can say is that after members of the Cabinet have reviewed both submissions, this is a massively exciting opportunity for Oldham. I know residents have told us that they're frustrated with the perceived lack of delivery. What's perceived? It isn't perceived. It is a lack of delivery on our ambitious regeneration plans. Ambitious, pie in the sky would be more appropriate. But apparently this thing is happening, And their target is to deliver 2,000 new homes in the town centre by releasing some of the council's own brownfield site. Okay, 2,000 new homes. Over time, they reckon this community, so the 2,000 new homes, will help boost footfall and spending in the town centre. It will increase the council tax receipts. Of course it will, which will benefit the council financially, and it will bring life back into key sites in the town centre and hopefully give people the hope and aspiration. The hope and aspiration? She doesn't even make sense with what she says. Hope and aspiration for what? The partnership will bring millions of pounds of investments, and of course she's just plucked that figure out of the sky. There's nothing to quantify that, to Oldham, with social value and wide opportunities for our communities embedded in that. That's just gobbledygook nonsense. It's just bullshit bingo. It's actually a really, really exciting. So from massively, Gary, we've gone to really. It's actually a really, really exciting moment for Oldham. And I'm really glad. So it's actually a really, really exciting moment for Oldham. And I'm really glad that I'm here to see it, oversee it. And we can't wait to share more in the future. Well, she thinks she's here to oversee it. She won't be here to oversee it by the end of this transmission. And if she is, her council won't be here to oversee what comes afterwards. Mark my words. Mark my words. Abdul Jabbar then goes on about net zero, like he has any understanding of what net zero is. But this is what I wanted to share with you. These are the comments. This is how much Oldham's now turned. Will the people of Oldham ever remove this lot? Is the first comment. Any new roads, doctors, hospital beds, schools, etc. to cope with the influx in population. 2,000 new homes. Say a minimum of 3 people a house, and I'm being modest, I think 6,000. Yeah. I will be fully investigating the company when OMBC release the name to find out who owns it and all of its directors and officers to ensure that there are no councillors linked to the company, including any family members. Nice. It strikes me as odd, and this is actually very good by JPCW. It strikes me as odd that a deal of this magnitude and for such an extended period, remember 25 years, is being slipped through at maximum speed without any real scrutiny, just as OMBC's current chief executive is retiring and before a new one can be appointed. Still, I suppose it will be handy for all the usual suspects to have someone to blame when its true nature and likely deficiencies become apparent, as they generally do. Arouge is back. Is a mate Imis site foreman. 2,000 new homes. How many of those will go up for sale? How many people? Remember Sean Fielding claimed, at the time Sean Fielding claimed that people would choose to live in Oldham's town centre rather than in Saddleworth. That was his claim. People would choose to live in Oldham town centre rather than Saddleworth. I also know of at least, 20 families, 30 families who've been promised social housing if they voted Labour in the last election, the election before, and the election before, on some of these houses. These houses are already being promised. So it'll be interesting to see which of these are social houses and which of these are the ones that people will say, "Oh, darling, instead of moving to Saddleworth, let's move to the edge of St Mary's and Coldest. We can raise our families there. We can raise our kids there." You know what? The council officers should be made to live in these houses. They should be made to buy houses and live in these houses. And then we'll see. Yeah, it's an absolute joke. Absolute joke. I want to move on to Greater Manchester Police and continuing on the public inquiry and how Greater Manchester Police need to be investigated. If you'll recall, in the lead up to the election, I was arrested for objecting to being harassed and threatened. Greater Manchester Police were forced to interview one individual. They're trying to not interview any of the others, but they were forced to introduce this one individual. His name is Shuel Hussain is his name. And Shewal Hussain went on a private WhatsApp group and contacted a friend of mine to tell me I was going to have some damage done to me. In fact, I'll bring it up and you can see it yourself. Tell your mate to take the post down, please, or he will get some damage done to him. And so there's no ambiguity. Later on, right near the end, tell Raja to immediately take down or will be consequences for him. So the police interviewed him, didn't arrest him. They sent him a nice letter and arranged for him to go in for interview. And I knew full well what Detective Constable Alexandra Collier and her friends were up to, because Detective Constable Alexandra Collier, Daniel whatever and Suzanne whatever they are, and I'll name them, I'll find photographs if need be. In fact, I'm going to go to Oldham Police Station on Monday and launch the first of my manifesto pledges. This is what she had to say. And this is the 23rd of June, by the way. So they've spent 2 months and they've been brought to this position kicking and screaming. I have discussed the crime for malicious communications with my sergeant. She won't tell me the name of her sergeant, and I've repeatedly asked her for the name of her sergeant, and she refuses to provide me with that. Mr. Hussain stated that he meant no harm by the comment, and that he was saying it in a general term because there was a lot of uproar about your comments in a WhatsApp group. Well, this isn't a WhatsApp group, this is a text message, and he was saying it in a general term. So, getting some damage done to me is apparently in a general term, and he meant no harm by it, even though he then follows it up with tell Raja to immediately take down that post or there will be consequences for him. So that's the first reason. He stated he does not know you personally. So I, you, me, any one of us can now go and punch the shit out of someone on the street, and it's not a crime because we don't know them personally. And I'm sorry if punching you and kicking your head in caused you any harm. It was just a flippant comment to get the post taken down from social media. And the reason he wanted to take the post down from social media is because he didn't like what I'd said about the mosque. I'd not said anything about the mosque, by the way. It has been reviewed by my sergeant, whose name remains secret, and it has been decided that it will be closed to no further action. Therefore, I am no longer the officer in charge or sort of your investigation, so please refrain from reporting to myself. Well, Detective Constable Collier's career I will finish. Alexandra Collier's career I will finish, because from the moment I started conversing with her, I knew she was neck deep in the cover-up. Because in this town of ours, the Labour Party foot soldiers, the OBA cartel foot soldiers, the Pakistanis, the Bangladeshis, anyone linked to the bloc Muslim vote to the Labour Party are protected from crimes. That is what takes place in this town, and Greater Manchester Police are complicit in it. And once we get our public inquiry, and we will have our public inquiry, make no mistake about that, Detective Constable Collier will have retired and resigned and run to the hills. That's what she will have done along with her colleagues. Because this is the covering up of criminality. Remember, they came and dragged me out of my house on an anonymous allegation, and yet here, when the malice is very clear, these people are protected. So we can damage Detective Constable Collier or any of her mates, and we can use the word damage. I'm going to damage you, and what are you going to do? Because clearly it's meant flippantly, and if I don't know you, it doesn't matter. When Greater Manchester Police, when my sister reported the malicious smears by Tahir Mushtaq, Councillor Mushtaq's brother, and his mates about my mother being a prostitute, Greater Manchester Police's response was, we're not going to investigate because he did not contact her directly with these allegations. When I was a young man, I used to have respect for the police. They are absolute vermin, neck deep in the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of children, and the reason why is the same then as it is now with these things. The reason why is that they are protecting the bloc Muslim Labour Party vote. That is what they are doing. This is not about community relations. This is not about police officers not knowing better. They know exactly what they are doing. There is a list of people in the headquarters of Greater Manchester Police that are protected. Remember last year when those vigilante lads went and smashed those windows and dragged people outside and beat them up, law into their own hands, because they knew full well that those men who'd battered that young man to an inch of his life were protected because of their associations with the OBA. And it went right back to councillors. In this town, the police protect the Labour Party politicians and those connected with the Labour Party politicians. That's what happens in this town. And it's happened for a long time. It's happened with the grooming gang members. Why do you think Shabir Ahmed was protected? Why do you think they kept hidden from you that he was a member of the Labour Party? Why do you think they kept hidden from you how the police forgot to report it to his employer? Why do you think it was hidden from you how Oldham Council, his employer, were not involved in the subsequent investigation, even though he accessed children from his place of work? Greater Manchester Police is infested with criminals. And there will be a reckoning. We will clean them up. We will clean them up. Here's Arooj Shah. Arooj Shah, this is Chief Constable. This is the Chief Constable. And they did, Sheila. They protected the car bombers. This is the Constable giving Arooj Shah a medal after we ousted her in Chadderton South. A medal for what? No one knows. A medal for what? Greater Manchester Police to this day refuse to confirm if the now leader of Oldham Council was questioned as a suspect in the firebombing of a car, because if it was you or I, we would have been questioned. This is one of the whistleblowers. He's very clear that Irish Imi was the armourer. That's the man who supplied the weapons to Dale Cregan. Those are the weapons that ended up in a drain pipe in Glodick, remember? I released these pictures 3 years ago. There's Arooj Shah in a car with Irish Imi. Arooj Shah with Zia Hussein who kidnapped someone, sexually abused them, and her brother, who's a convicted money launderer. Here's Irish Imi on the 4th of May, day of the elections. FUCK the Tories. Big G-Wagon or something with a Vota Rouge thing behind him. 4th of May, I want you to look at the dates. 12th of May. 12th of May after the elections. Irish Imi, nice to have the real leader of Oldham Council back. 12th of May. 23rd of May. Sana's restaurant, attending a dinner. Arooj Shah sat next to Irish Imi. Winning candidates. Yeah. Councillor Shahid Mushtaq there, the deputy leader there as well with Irish Imi. Speaking. He's standing and speaking. You can see that. The audience of Pakistani men. 23rd of May. They sat there, you can see. You can see his tattoos. 21st of May. 23rd of May, Omar Sharif put this up. Arooj Shah is out at this celebration thing in Glodick. Irish Imi is the Arooj Shah thank you event. Irish Imi posts it, you can see. The 22nd of May. The dates are important. The dates are important. So you got the 22nd of May, that event. 21st of May, they were at this restaurant, or the 23rd of May, yeah. And the 12th of May, the week after, there's Irish Imi, there's Arooj Shah's brother and Arooj Shah. And he was front and centre at the campaign. Right? You've heard this before. It's imperative you hear it again. This is the interview with Kevin Fitzpatrick from the BBC.
Anyone who's received death threats and online abuse could be forgiven for deciding a life in the public eye wasn't for them. But Oldham's returning council leader, Arooj Shah, says she's more determined than ever to have a positive impact. After being re-elected onto the council following a year in the wilderness, the Labour politician is back in charge of one of Greater Manchester's most challenging boroughs. I've been to meet her and asked her how she feels to be back.
Absolutely amazing, almost like I never left, but I'm really delighted to be back.
Why have you come back? Because last time you suffered death threats, your car was set on fire, you received constant abuse online.
Yeah, I did, and that's always unpleasant, and it's always hurtful, and it's always upsetting for you and the people around you, the people that care about you so much. But, you know, I'm Oldham born and bred, and my passion just never ever went. In fact, the horrible smear campaign last year and the horrendous time that I had made me even more determined that you don't allow a vocal minority to affect the change you want to bring in improving people's lives.
A lot of the anger online was about claims that there'd been a cover-up of child sexual exploitation in Oldham. In the year that you weren't in charge, a review was published and that said there wasn't a cover-up, but there were serious failings that let down some young girls in the town. Can you reassure people that that's not happening now?
You can never reassure people that that's not happening. All you can do is do your best to make sure that those victims, wherever they are, receive the support that they need. And my empathy has always been the victims and the survivors. But, you know, obviously, I think last time, in my last tenure as leader, I had Meet the Leader events, and that was because I wanted people to be able to have those conversations that are uncomfortable, but absolutely the right thing to do. And I'm going to continue with them this year. The perpetrators deserve the most severe punishment, and we will do everything that we can, along with our stakeholders at GMP, to make sure that they get what they deserve.
You've had a lot of criticism online, partly aimed at some of your associations with people, some of them convicted criminals from the past, one man in particular who was a getaway driver for the police murderer, Dale Cregan. Are you still associated with these people, and can you see why, in the eyes of some, that damages your reputation?
Of course it does, Kevin. I get that completely, and I get people's concerns. But like I've always said, I want to be judged by my own actions and my own conduct. I'm not responsible for the people, but at the same time, you know, rehabilitation is the law of this land. You know,
rehabilitation is the law of this land. At the same time, rehabilitation is the law of this land. Here is Arooj Shah suggesting that a gangster childhood friend, Irish Imi, who by the way was convicted on the 5th of May for crimes against me, is rehabilitated. Rehabilitation is the law of this land. And she said this was put out on the 12th of May, Friday the 12th of May. Yes?
I think society is stronger when that happens. And for me, doing what feels ultimately the right thing to do is probably the most difficult to do. You can't forget people that you've grown up with, family or so.
You can't forget who you've grown up with. I'm going to come back to that. Remind me to come back to you can't forget who you've grown up with.
Associations, I know it's been highlighted like it's just
family associations, remind me to come back to that.
My personal association, but it isn't. And, you know, I'm now re-elected in a community where opportunities aren't the same for everybody else. And, you know, you have to...
Oh, stuff that. I'm not listening to that bollocks again about, you know, I was poor, so I became a heroin dealing gangster. Arooj Shah had Irish Imi on her arm throughout her election campaign. He was out knocking on doors, canvassing for votes. There were record numbers of postal votes in St Mary's Ward. My information is that at least 500 of those votes were fraudulent, harvested and traded between candidates. Greater Manchester Police should investigate, but we now know they won't investigate because Greater Manchester Police are neck deep with these criminals. It's the same reason they won't investigate the firebombing of this car after the video footage came out, because it meant that they could not incriminate me and imprison me falsely for that crime. And this is why the government needs to step in, because Greater Manchester Police are corrupt. Arooj Shah is very clear there. On the Friday, the 12th of May, in that interview, and at the, you know, it would have been at the 10th, maybe. It would have been the week, wouldn't it? It'd have been from the 8th or something. It'd have been from the 8th of May. Dates are important. I'm going through, you know how I am. Dates, facts, data, sequence of events, always important. Earlier this week, one of my sources contacted me. I then reached out into the community and had the evidence, the information triangulated, like I do. Now I ask you this. Why did Greater Manchester Police not issue a press release? They issue a press release at all other times. Why did Charlotte Green, the local democracy reporter, the Oldham Times, the Manchester Evening News not report on this? They reported on me and fabricated an allegation that I'd been arrested as a child sex investigation, as part of a child sex exploitation investigation, lied. Charlotte Green and her team didn't report on it. The police didn't issue a statement. Normally you'll see, on Twitter or Facebook, GMP confirmed they've made an arrest here, there, somewhere else. Of course, the malicious blogger isn't going to say anything and damage his payroll. The 7th of May was Saturday night, Sunday, yeah? About 1:30 a.m. on Saturday night, there was a call to Greater Manchester Police, an emergency call, 999 emergency call to Greater Manchester Police. My information is, without the CCTV footage, Greater Manchester Police, I think, would have preferred for this to go away because they're corrupt. They're in bed with Arooj Shah and her Labour Party mates. The reports were of a man with a machete going after one of his neighbours. The police turned up, arrested the man, went into his house and recovered the bladed item that people on that street have confirmed to me was a machete. The police entered the house, arrested a man, and came out with the bladed weapon. So this man had tried to attack someone else, or attack property, whatever, I'm not sure, and I'll go with the facts that I've got. I'll go with the facts. Mohammed Imran Ali, date of birth 4th of the 9th, 1980, was charged for criminal damage and possession of an offensive weapon. He is due to appear in court on the 9th of November. That's the 7th of May this took place. The 7th of May. Here we have Arooj Shah. If that took place on the 7th of May, in a BBC interview talking about rehabilitation, here she is with him on the 12th of May. This man is facing, and of course, innocent before, proven guilty and all of that applies. And here is the leader of the council with him. Here is the leader of the council celebrating with him. Here is the leader of the council sat with him. Here is the leader of the council out at a children's event where this man had previously, the week earlier, been charged by the police. And here is the leader of the council giving an interview to the BBC, and the BBC would have known. Kevin Fitzpatrick, once again, is neck deep in the cover-up of criminality in Oldham. Remember, he's the BBC reporter that was involved in covering this up because of his relations, covering up the grooming gangs, the shisha bars, because of his relationship with Jim McMahon and his friendship. Arooj Shah's position as leader of Oldham Council is now untenable. Arooj Shah's position as leader of Oldham Council is now untenable. Her childhood friend, her rehabilitated humanitarian childhood friend, has been charged by Greater Manchester Police and is due to appear in court on the 9th of November. And despite him being charged with criminal damage and possession of an offensive weapon, believed to be a machete, and she's going on about rehabilitation. Are you telling me she didn't know what had happened on the Saturday night? Are you telling me she didn't know what happened on the Saturday night? Are you telling me Jim McMahon didn't know what happened on the Saturday night? Are you telling me Stephen Bashforth didn't know? Ross Birch? Elaine Taylor? Are you telling me Abdul Jabbar didn't know? Fida Hussein didn't know? Just what do you think was said when he went knocking on doors wanting votes? If I lived in Glodick and he'd come knocking on my door, I'd just hand him over my postal vote and said, I'll get you 10 more from my mates. A machete on the Saturday night. Why is this not in the Oldham Times? Why did Chief Constable Ian Watson and his Oldham Chief Superintendent Chris Bowen not issue a statement? Why is this being hidden from you? This is why this town needs a public inquiry, because the police are the criminals. They are complicit in the cover-up. They are partners in it. What do you think someone is going to do with a machete, Julie? If you're a dangerous criminal who's got form for assaulting and beating up people, what do you think you're going to be doing with a machete? And why is he on bail out back in this town? Going to parties with politicians. Shahid Mushtaq. Councillor Shahid Mushtaq shares a platform with him. The deputy leader. Where a week earlier he's been charged. Aruj Shah's position is now untenable. She has to resign, and if she does not resign, we will take Ross Birch out. We'll take Steve Bashforth out. We'll take Elaine Taylor out. We'll take every one of you white Labour Party councillors out on the back of your support of not just the Pakistani rape gangs, but this level of criminality. We will take every one of you out, because I know in the white communities, the block postal vote does not hold sway, and we can mobilise and we can win elections. In Failsworth, we'll take that friar out. Josh Charters, you're going in St James. There will be a vote of no confidence against Aruj Shah and her council at the first council meeting, and every Labour Party councillor who supports her is supporting this. Gangsters running the town. With bent police officers. Complicit. Yes, Lynn, the opposition should be up in arms demanding her resignation. And I'll read this again to you. I got this from trusted sources. Cross-reference. 7th of May 2023, it was about 1:30. He attacked one of his neighbours. Criminal damage, possession of an offensive weapon. He was charged and is due for his whatever hearing on the 9th of November. Maybe we should all go on the 9th of November. Maybe we should all go on the 9th of November. Because the Oldham Times won't be there. Charlotte Green won't be there. The Manchester Evening News won't be there. Criminals run this town. This is what happens when you don't conform. This is what happens when you stand up to them. Pam Byrne. What have you got to say, Pam Byrne? Aruj Shah is finished. Her position is untenable. She has openly had Irish Immi campaigning alongside her. She has refused to distance herself from this man despite his past on the basis that he's rehabilitated. She's kept hidden his repeated convictions against me. Now you can say, okay, those are low-level convictions. Maybe to you they are, to me they're not. But being charged for criminal damage and possession of an offensive weapon is not a low-level crime. Aruj Shah's position as leader of Oldham Council is now untenable. Come on, Bashforth. What have you got to say, or do you need to phone Jim up? How about you, Debbie Abrahams? What do you have to say, Debbie? The deputy leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner, will be, if Labour win an election, Deputy Prime Minister, has links to this woman. How can the Labour Party continue this? When is enough enough? Now, let it play out in court. I hope it plays out in court, because I know what I fear will happen. I fear whoever this poor victim is will be intimidated by a malicious blogger and a whole host of glodic gangsters to drop charges. All of that will play out in the background. That's my experience, the other way around. The CCTV footage. The CCTV footage. Why is the Oldham Times not reporting this? Why is it not in the Manchester Evening News? Why has Chief Superintendent Chris Bowen and his Oldham police officers not issued a statement? Who runs the town? Who runs this town? My plea to the likes of Maggie, the Oldham Conservatives, who've been brave in this, is he needs to be brave again. Mark Hints, Sandra in Failsworth. Hoban won't do it because Hoban is brown-nosing Arooj Shah and Irish Imi and them. That's what the FIP lot are doing. We need to immediately call for a resignation. We need to immediately call for a resignation on the back of what her childhood friend has been charged with, a man who she has repeatedly risked herself for. Now, why has she risked herself for him? She claims it's a childhood friend. Well, my sources claim otherwise. She claims he's a family friend. Well, my sources claim otherwise on that as well. This is no childhood friendship of two children playing hopscotch together. This is no family friendship of two mothers and two fathers knowing each other. And I believe my sources more than I believe Arooj Shah. You need to find the courage in here and share, speak to whoever you want to speak to, share, contact your counsellor. Contact your counsellors. It'll take you 2 minutes. Contact your counsellors and say, in light of Irish Imi being charged for criminal damage and possessing an offensive weapon, and his relationship with the Arooj Shah, will you call for her resignation, bearing in mind specifically that she repeatedly says he's rehabilitated, even in a BBC interview on the 12th of May. She would have known he'd been arrested because he'd been arrested and kept locked up for a few days at least. Before he was bailed, they kept him locked up for a few days. She would have known. And she's misleading the town by talking about her criminal associates and the power of rehabilitation. Greater Manchester Police wanted this information hidden from you. The Oldham Times wanted this information hidden from you, and the Labour Party kept this information hidden from you. For those of you new to me, my name is Raj Amir. I will be at Oldham Police Station tomorrow morning launching the first of my manifesto pledges. I will do it from outside the criminal headquarters of Greater Manchester Police. This is the headquarters where children are handed over to rapists. It's gone too far. It already went too far. But now, at least then they were hiding it. They're not even hiding it. They're brazenly showing off. He's putting a picture up on the 12th of May. On the 7th of May, he was in a police cell. To Lewis Quigg, Dave Arnott, Mark Hints, call for a resignation. Maggie Hurley, call for a resignation. Call for an immediate resignation. Or if you want to play a politician, ask the Labour Party councillors in your ward publicly for them to issue a statement on their position on it. Ask Bashforth. Ask Howard Sykes. Mark, ask Howard Sykes. Lewis, ask Josh Charters. Ask Jim McMahon to issue a statement. They think you're all stupid and they can just play you. They can do whatever you want and you lot will do nothing. You'll just sit there and take it. After all, your children were groomed and gang raped and you just sat there and took it. I think the time has come for us to take our town back. And no matter what Jim McMahon says, I will be standing at the general election. And mark my words, Greater Manchester Police, forget what you've done to me. What we will do to you, the people of this town will do to you and every one of you, will be multiplied. And then some. You will be humiliated and you will beg for forgiveness for how you have failed the people of this town. Because at the centre of this, we know the press can be manipulated. We know councillors are crooked. But the police have a duty. And the police have failed in their duty and failed in their duty again. And why? Why are they covering up for criminals? Why are they protecting these Asian men? Why? I'll tell you why. It's because these men deliver votes. These men are essential to the machinery of the Labour Party. Men like Irish Imi, men like Shabir Ahmed, crucial. How many votes do you think Irish Imi was responsible for? I fully expect to be arrested for sharing this information with you and for speaking out today for what I've said about Greater Manchester Police and the way in which they have protected individuals. I'm very clear on my position. The grooming gang members were not protected because they were raping children. They were protected because of who they were. Likewise, Mushtaq Mir and Ish Suel Hussein, they're protected not because of what the crimes they were committing. They were protected because of who they are and who they were linked with. And it's the same with Irish Imi. He's protected. Crimes he commits are not reported in the newspapers, and they're not reported in the newspapers, and the police don't even issue statements on them because of who he is connected with. And that isn't just Arooj Shah, it extends to the Labour Party. There is a deep, dangerous poison in this town. It needs to be rooted out. This town needs cleansing. We need the government to come in and take over. We need the National Crime Agency in to investigate Greater Manchester Police. We need some independent police force to come into this town and look at the crimes that are being committed by police officers who are protecting the criminals and the politicians. It's a mess. It's a complete mess. You couldn't make up what's gone on here. Which is why I say to some of you, there's no need to exaggerate. There's no need to fantasize, because what is true taking place here is worse than any book of fiction any of you would ever have read. My name is Raja Mia. This is a Recusant 9 transmission. It's transmission number 2. Thank you very, very much for joining me. Please go out there and share the news. Irish Imi has been charged with criminal damage and possession of an offensive weapon on the 7th of May 2023, and despite him being charged, Arooj Shah went to the BBC and talked about her friends being rehabilitated and partied with him. Partied with a man charged for wielding a machete.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.